Welcome to a new edition of If I Ever Live to Be. Today I have Rebecca Strobl. She is founder and president of New Day Education and Motivation. She's a speaker, a retired volunteer fire chief, which we're going to get into. And she's also author of the book New Day Inspirations. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so thrilled to be here, Whitney.
I'm going to have to start paying royalties to Buffy and Matt Payne because they have introduced me to many amazing guests, and that is where you and I met, my friends. So Matt and Buffy, checks in the mail. I don't know what else to say there.
Exactly.
But we met because really we were at, I want to call it like a ladies' luncheon, but it was just really a small group of us. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 of us that Buffy had got together for lunch. And I was honored to be a part of that because I feel like she brought together these amazing powerhouse women all together to share at lunch. So share with our listeners, Rebecca, a little bit about you. And I'd love to know when you decided to become a fire chief and now and how you went from fire chief to speaker to author.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting journey. So I did not always want to be a firefighter. That was actually something that came out of wanting to help my community. So if we go back to, I always tell people the starting point with my journey is look at the 5-year-old version of myself that was convinced that that 5-year-old that she was going to be a medical missionary overseas working in a clinic somewhere helping people. That was the journey I was on for all of my schooling, middle school, high school, even the early college years. Was the medical missionary route, and I was pursuing nursing. So where in the heck does a fire chief and a security director and an author and all this come into play? Well, God has an interesting plan, and he definitely has a sense of humor. For me, that transition to when I met my husband, we got married, we were living in Michigan. He went to school at Life University. He's a chiropractor, and he told me all about how amazing Georgia was. And I definitely had no desire to stay in Michigan. I had went out to school in Oklahoma because I wanted to get away from the snow. And I moved back to Michigan for 3 years to be with him. And then when he told me all about Georgia, I'm like, I'm there, let's go. It took us a handful of years. We finally got there. So when we got here, we didn't have anything, starting from scratch. So I worked at a staffing company. And one of my first long-term jobs was them to be an executive assistant to a sales director at Georgia Marble in their Tombstone division. So one day he comes in and my boss puts all these marble samples in my lap and on my desk, along with a brochure, and proceeds to tell me that as one salesperson died, the other person he had to let go. He was going to some funeral homes and cemeteries over the next few weeks, and that he needed orders. He needed them right now. Here's a list of all of our clients. You better get me some orders. That was my initiation into sales.
Yeah.
And I asked him, well, I've heard of Italian marble, so why is Georgia marble so much better? And he said, it's the way that the earth compresses the marble. It's a lot more dense. And he said, also, you can do a test. Our founder, Mr. Tate, who died in the early 1900s, if you go to his tomb, take a wet washcloth, wipe off the marble, it'll be the same consistency, structure, and brilliance of what's coming out of the ground today. Wow. And that was back in 2023. A little bit of time between his death and when I was there.
Right.
So I'm like, you're on. Because if you're right, and this just isn't a gimmick because your butt's in the sling because you need sales, then I'm on. So I did, went on my lunch break, grabbed the washcloth, in the cemetery, wiping off the tombstone. And sure enough, he was right. So I was gang on. So then I started smiling and dialing, no sales experience. Again, before this time, I had worked as a candy striper. I had worked as a cardiac nurse's tech, nurse's aide, on that path. Well, next thing you know, my boss tells me, saying he's getting complaints from the plant because they can't keep up with orders. And then a light clicked on that, oh, wow, okay, I'm good at sales.
Right.
So I worked there for a while, and then that company, we got bought out by a company in Europe, and then they said you need to go find something else. So I looked in the want ads, found an ad for a security company, and they were looking for inside sales reps. And I thought to myself, well, I've only been in a sales career selling tombstones for a month of my life. But hey, I didn't know anything about that. Don't know anything about security. Let's give it a ring. So I went there and I interviewed with him. That was an interesting conversation. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to give you a chance. And the cool thing with that is he said, you know, you don't have the background for this. Why should I hire you? And I said, well, challenge me, make me sell something. So he gave me the ugliest tie known to man and a pen and said I had to sell it. And after I did, he's like, he hired me. So that's how I got into the security world. So I did that and had the opportunity, went from sales rep, became a manager. So during that process, my husband and I were living in the gated community up here in North Georgia where we live now. And there was a volunteer fire department within the community because we're about 70 miles of roads in our community. There's only two ways in and out. And there's two fire stations. One is staffed by the volunteers and then one is staffed by the county fire department. And on average, it can take 12 minutes for anybody to come when you call 911. So there's a bit of a gap there. And the county fire station, all those resources are located at the one end and we lived at the other end. So anyway, we got involved with that because people approached us and said, hey, we have this issue. We have slow response time. With your background, with my husband being a chiropractor, me having the prior medical experience, you can help. So we jumped in. And I was still corporate America, running my sales team, 25 people, commuting into Atlanta every day from where I live here in the mountains. So along that journey, the county fire department offered an opportunity that for 2 years, if you would give up almost a year of your life, 2 nights a week, and on Saturdays, they would send you through EMT school and fire school for free. So again, I was corporate America security sales. I'm like, I really don't have an intention to become a career firefighter or work on an ambulance, but I'm not going to miss out on this opportunity to get this kind of training because, again, I want to help my community. That's why we became part of the volunteer fire department. And I want the knowledge to be able to help better in an emergency because people didn't care that my husband and I were volunteers. When they called 911 and we were the first one there because we lived close while we were waiting for ambulances or fire trucks to come, they're looking at us to help. And I'm like, I need the knowledge. So I went and I took those classes. So in that process, after I got those certifications and licenses, I looked at our volunteer fire department and I thought, we have a lot of seasoned members and we need to step up our game. They gave me the opportunity to be lieutenant and take over training operations. So I kicked our training into high gear at the volunteer fire department. And then it was pretty cool because other volunteer fire departments from around the state started hearing about the training I was putting on, and they started asking me if they could come join us. So that was going along. And then it came to a point along that journey, after I've been doing that for a while, that our volunteer fire chief resigned. The way things were going is at the time, our volunteer fire department had been around since the early 80s. And we had equipment, fire truck, and other things that the community had paid for. And our focus as a department had gotten away from really helping the community because the signs were on the wall that the county fire department eventually was going to be taking over all the volunteer departments in the county, and they would be the sole response force, and we would be a supplement. And that was a hard pill for people that had been in the department a long time to swallow. The way I saw it was we have a certain amount of time before that final transition happens.
Right.
And we need to make sure that in that time, we find a way to best serve our neighbors and make sure that we can position things in a way so that when that transition happens, all the resources and equipment that they paid for will remain here. And that when this transition is finally over and all the dust settles, our community will still be well cared for.
Mm.
The way I saw it was this is an opportunity to make things better and to leave a legacy of care versus, oh my God, this is horrible. They're totally disrupting the apple cart.
Right.
When our volunteer fire chief resigned, at the time, I was the only state of Georgia registered female firefighter in that department, all guys. So when he resigned and we're all standing around in the fire station in the bay next to the fire truck, what are we going to, they're all like, what are we going to do? I raised my hand and I said, I feel I can make a difference and I'd like to help. Now, keep in mind, at the time, I was working at least 60 hours a week running my sales team in Atlanta. I was the condo manager for the condo association in the condos we live in. I was also running 911 calls when I wasn't in Atlanta working. And I was an advisor for the county fire department's Explorer program, helping 14 to 21-year-olds figure out if they want a career in the fire service. I had no clue where I was going to find time to run a fire department, but for me, the need was so great, I couldn't help. So I said, I'd be glad to do it. All the male firefighters in my department all unanimously voted for me, and they took it to the board of our department and they all voted me. So that's how I became a volunteer fire chief.
Very nice. Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question is I guess most would say that's a man's world. You were a woman in a man's world. How is that different navigating that role?
It was extremely difficult. And I realized that I had become the first female fire chief in my department, but I had no idea that I had actually made history because I had newspapers coming to me and interviewing me, telling me I was actually the first female fire chief in our county. And then I even received a letter of accommodation from a congressman.
Wow.
No clue. I just wanted to help.
Yeah.
To your point, I was very blessed that spending 20 years in the security industry, running a sales team, being really the only female leader for a long time in my organization that was at that level, working with retired colonels and law enforcement and those individuals really seasoned me up and helped me understand that world better. But it was a challenge. And how I navigated it is I didn't demand respect, I proved it in my actions. So that's why all those years that I was in the fire service, even though I had the corporate sales security career where my colleagues were taking classes and really doing everything can to position themselves to be well in corporate America, I was not. I kept my head down and I was doing my job, making sales happen. But all my professional focus was on the fire service to be the best I could be and to have the knowledge and to have something to pull out of the toolbox to serve my firefighters, because I knew that as a woman being a minority in that world, I was never going to compete with them on the brute strength, but I made a commitment to outshine them in the compassion area and in the knowledge area, as far as having the knowledge and the strategy to keep them safe and to help serve our community, thinking outside of the box. Because I knew that that was the area that not only I could thrive, but as females, we tend to be better in those areas. So that was my effort. Literally, for many, many years, all of my vacation time from the corporate job was spent on traveling to South Georgia to the fire training headquarters and taking classes with other fire chiefs from around the state. Again, being the only lady in those classes 9 times out of 10, and to gather from them and to learn to better serve.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said is so important and can be applied by anyone across the board, right? I'm even thinking of the old adage of if you're a janitor, sweep the floor better than anyone else has ever swept the floor. If you have the knowledge and you put in the work to learn and you show others respect and you walk in with that, you don't have to be loud and demanding. It will come eventually. I mean, I feel like that's also a large part of of building trust, because that trust is so essential too when you're new to an arena, or if you are the minority in that group, building that trust and that respect. I feel like it's one of those, it's one begets and fosters the other. And if you show that to others, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get it back.
Absolutely.
So tell us about this concept of knowledge saves lives, because I feel like where we're going to go with this is I'm out at a restaurant and someone starts choking and I think I know what to do and I'm going to jump in and save the day. Whitney does not know what to do. I wouldn't know like where to place hands, to do the Heimlich maneuver or any of those things. But I feel like maybe outside of that situation, we all think we know what to do.
That's exactly right. Yes. And with my company, that's what I specialize in empowering people with, because I can tell you all those years of running 911 calls, especially in the setting that I did it in my community, with sometimes just because of geography and what was going on with the county fire department, there would be a delayed response. And I saw too many times where people were in situations that didn't have that knowledge that you were talking about, had never had the training, and they were panicked and outcomes went a certain direction. And if they would have had the knowledge and the training, those outcomes wouldn't have gone the direction they went.
Right.
Because even though my husband and I, or oftentimes my husband when I was working in Atlanta, we got there quickly, there were still things that could have been done in those first few minutes, but because they didn't have the knowledge, they froze in fear. Because a lot of people think that, oh, I'm just going to watch a TV show, or I'm going to watch an online video and I'll know what to do. I can tell you that that's not the way our brains and our bodies work. We have to actually do it. We have to have that muscle memory. So in my classes, I'm really big on making everybody did it. In fact, last night I did a Stop Life-Threatening Bleeding. My company donated a Stop Life-Threatening Bleeding class to the Explorer Post. So I worked with 21 teenagers last night between the ages of 14 and 21, and did a lot of laundry this morning because we had a lot of fun doing class last night. And it was so cool because we have a lot of new teenagers that just joined the post, and so many of them came up to me last night and said, I'm so excited, like I know what to do now, I can help somebody. Whereas before they would have been that person frozen, not knowing what to do.
Interesting. So speak more about that calmness too, because that's one of the other things that comes to my mind is so much with our EMTs, our first responders, there's just an additional level of calmness there, of like being able to take the situation, assess it, know what to do when you get those 911 calls, right? The other person on the other end of the line is spiraling because they're needing your help and they don't know what to do, but you have to remain calm on this end of the line to kind of guide them through what to do. So tell me more about that. And then how do you train for that? How do you train the calmness?
Absolutely. So when we go through fire school, when we go through EMT school, our instructors are very big on stressing the heck out of us on multiple occasions to make a call. Whether we like it or not, they will continue the training and the intensity until you become calm. And they teach us different principles as far as making sure the scene is safe and taking those few minutes to take it in. But it really does come back to the knowledge, because if your brain is able to take a few seconds while you're breathing, and your brain can open up a filing cabinet and look in and see there's something there to know A, B, C, D, this is what I do, while the rest of the brain is like freaking out, screaming, having a panic attack. If the other part of your brain can have that file cabinet to open up and have a plan of action, that's where the calmness comes in.
Interesting. I feel like that could be applied, like say when we get a angry email and we want to immediately, right, make the keyboard like smoke because we're trying to send back our angry response, where if we would just pause for a moment pull out those, like, I can be calm, I can be I can still be assertive, but like just giving yourself that moment. I mean, we've heard it time and time again, right? Of like, type it, don't send it, come back and read it later. I mean, I just feel like that's like next level once you're able to master that.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice. It's interesting because
Yeah.
in the Explorer post we have youth leadership. So all the youth, they elect their captain every year. They elect their two lieutenants, and then they appoint sergeants. So my husband and I were having a long conversation last night with a lieutenant and some of the leaders there, and they were sharing their frustrations of trying to lead their fellow teenagers and the hassles. And it's really neat to see 16, 17-year-olds that are grappling with this same discussion that we're talking about. Us as seasoned professionals with a little bit more wind beneath our sails than them. And that was the conversation I had with them last night, that a real leader takes that few minutes to stay calm and to look at the bigger picture, because that's the harder thing to do. The easy thing to do is to react and to type the angry email. But the higher level says, let me take a step and let me breathe and let me look at the whole picture. And I'm very grateful and blessed because in fire and EMS, that's what they do a really good job of teaching us before we ever step into the scene or the emergency. And again, this can be applied for any situation in our life,
Yeah.
to take those few moments to do a quick assessment. Is it safe? What is the big picture that I see? And that's where we can master that calmness, by taking those 2 minutes to breathe and to step back and think about what's the big picture, what's the big situation here, not just this one little piece that's really ticking me off or has me really upset.
Yeah. No, that's so right. And it is bigger, right? Like, especially as you get into senior executive C-suite positions, of you have hundreds of team members coming to you asking, what are we going to do? The industry's changing, or this new law was just passed, or hiring freezes. I don't know, fill in the blank. That leader has to not be distracted by all those other things going around, so that they can calmly lead their team forward. The concept is just amazing to me. And it's probably because, and if Buffy and Matt are listening, they'll laugh at this, because we're just having this conversation on Whitney's patience and or lack thereof. But I've gotten better. And, but I would tell you, one of the ways I've done that is just like through experiencing life, right? Like, there are just certain things that you go through, and you look back and you're like, oh, I made it out. Okay. I mean, and I'm not even, fighting a fire every day. I just, that's so important. And again, just being under that constant stress.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So out of all this and all that we've talked about, you have a new book out that was just published in 2024, right?
Yeah, it was just published in December.
Okay, awesome. And it's New Day Inspirations.
A poetry journey.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been writing poems for over 30 years now. The first poem I ever wrote was when I was 17 years old, and I was on a mission trip in Jamaica building a water tank for a deaf school. If you can picture this, in my book, I have some black and white pictures, but picture 30 teenagers. I'm the oldest one at the age of 17, being sent to Jamaica to build a water tank and be a construction crew. And we were told in the brochure that we would go to Miami for a couple of weeks. We would learn different things. We would go to Jamaica. We would live at the school. We would get to play and work with all these deaf children and educate them, and go to different villages. And we would be there to possibly help on the finishing stages of the water tank. That was not what happened. Spoiler alert. We get there, we find out that There are no deaf children because the school is not open, because it's a 2-story blank shell of a cement building with no doors, no windows, no floors. The missionaries had taken a little section of it and put doors and windows and made it a home for them and their little girl. There was no clean water source, thus the water tank situation. Their only source of water was rain barrels that they captured rain in, or you walk 5 miles to the nearest river where everybody did everything.
Wow.
And there
Wow.
was a little water tank that was like a holding tank behind the school, and then a mile up on top of a mountain that was over where the school was, that's where the water tank was going to be built. There was nothing up there. So the Jamaican crew that was supposed to be doing all this work before we got there, that didn't happen.
Wow.
All they had done was got the little water tank about 75% done. So yeah, so all of a sudden, and it was funny because in Miami, they had put us through all this concrete construction classes, how to lay a footer, how to cut rebar, how to do all this other stuff. And we were teenagers. None of us were paying attention to that because we thought we're not going to have to know this. The Jamaicans are going to have all that done by the time we get there. It's not the case.
Nice.
So during this time, we found out that we all of a sudden had to be like cement concrete workers. And for all of my friends in the construction industry, my hat's off to you. Bless your hearts. I commend you for what you do for a living because teenagers, we cannot even hold a candle to what you do every day.
Probably another role to be calm in.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So during this time, we were working 10 hours a day, maybe getting 2-3 hours of break. We had no clean water, very limited bathroom facilities. So during this time, I became extremely ill and I just didn't know what I was going to do. I'd never been away from home and I was really struggling. And in that pain and anguish, more ways than one on the pain side, I wrote my first poem, just crying out, trying to ask God to help me. And he gave me the words of that poem. And the good news is I'm still here today. I did not become a name on a tombstone in the jungles of Jamaica in 1993. Hallelujah. And that deaf school is still in operation today, thriving, giving deaf children in Jamaica a new future and a whole lot of love. And they have some really awesome water to drink. So pretty cool. So that was the first poem. And then as the years went by and continued to have struggles and things happened in my life, I wrote more poems. And then I would say probably around a decade ago or more, I started when I would see people going through something or friends or meet other people randomly. I would think about their situation and I would write them a card and I would just, in moments, I'd have a poem for them, specifically for them, for their situation. It would just come, the words would just flow out of my pen. They'd be right there. And I would give them to them. And then I'd get feedback where people were telling me they kept my cards for years because the poems really encouraged them, inspired them. And this kept on building and building up. And so last year, in 2023, I jumped off the cliff and decided to focus on my own company full time and wave goodbye to the really comfy, cushy corporate security sales job. And then last year in 2024, I thought, well, I jumped off that cliff last August, telling myself this last year. And I've had all these people for decades telling me how much the poems that I write and the notes with it really encourage them. And I thought, you know what? This world, especially last year, I thought with everything going on, we all need hope. We all need encouragement. And the lessons that I've learned that we're talking through today, some of them, that can really help people because I didn't have that type of encouragement or mentorship. I had some, but not to that level when I was in those situations. So, you know what? Why don't I just jump off another cliff and find a way and publish my first book? So literally, I had 30 years worth of poetry on napkins, on notebooks, on scrap pieces of paper. So I was able to find an awesome virtual assistant. Hey, Emily is her company, Emily Crawford, and I gave her all this stuff. And I said, hey, Can you put this into an electronic document? And then I found an awesome literary coach, and then she helped me put that into a book. And
Wow.
that's my book. And actually, the goal is New Day Inspirations will be a book series. And this is just the first book. So I already have in my head of all the other books, and believe in it might be a little bit, but I'm going to get there to get them all published. But that's the goal. Is really, this was a way to reach the whole world. And I thought about over the last 20 years, between my security family and all the contacts I had in corporate security, and then I think of fire and EMS, and then property management, and medical, and all these different worlds I've been in. And when I wrote my book, I had all the poems, and then I added 10 more. And I structured it in such a way, my goal was, no matter where you're coming from or what your perspective is or your viewpoint, religious, whatever, you'll find a poem out of the 62 that'll speak to you and hopefully encourage you. So I have it divided up into different sections. So there's some poems just on nature, there's some poems on faith, and each one has a memory of what happened to me, a life lesson, pictures. And then at the end, my good friend that endorsed my book, she actually, Chief Wanda Dunham, she became the first female African American police chief of the MARTA police system in Atlanta. And we were having conversations, and she wrote a book, Becoming Chief, which is awesome, talking about her journey, talk about trailblazer. That lady is amazing. And what she did in her book is, at the end, she summarized like all the lessons that she had learned. And so I did that in mind, where in the epilogue, I have a summary of like all the lessons. And then throughout the book, I also ask a lot of questions, like just questions to get you to think, and like, how can I use my pain, or how can I use my current challenge to, instead of having all the focus here on how, oh my God, this is awful, and how am I going to get through, to turn all that pain and like turn it outward to try to help. And so I have a summary of all those questions in the back.
Wow. Well, the thread I see in your story that's still developing, Rebecca, is that constant thread of, and you said it, wanting to help others. Just everything that you've done up to this point is for others and helping others, but also motivating and encouraging them. So before I let you go, because I know that you're a regular speaker, you go out, you talk to others, you share your stories, you motivate. How do people get in touch with you if they want your book, if they want to hire you to speak? Where do they contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to a couple different places. I have my company website, which is newdayeducationandmotivation.com. If you're interested in my book, you can go to my book website, which is newdayinspirationsbooks.com. Or you can just shoot me a quick email at Strobl, so RSTROBL, at New Day Education and Motivation. Or snoop on me and find me on LinkedIn or Facebook and drop me a message.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. This has been encouraging to me, and just enlightening too, to remind us all that you just got to put in a little bit of work, but you can do it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. This has been great. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.